Hong Kong today is a city that is split asunder. It's very, very sad.
Hong Kong today is very much going through its transitional history as part of China.
Do not judge Hong Kong by fanciful, wrong ideas about what a self-contained, sovereign-type democracy should be, because Hong Kong is not a sovereign country.
咁點樣變化，你好難控制，但係你做好個工作先，咁就會幫到個情況。我自己覺得。
55,353 cases.
成間院舍100%嘅院症。
Receive your jab as soon as possible.
Congratulations.
Patriots administering Hong Kong.
煽動他人係顛覆國家政權。
The government will formally withdraw the bill.
香港居民享有比历史上任何时候都更广泛的民主权利和自由。梁振英下台！
喺度呼籲，希望大家而家同我哋一齊入去公民廣場。
香港家長叫苦連天啊！
聽到自己嘅國歌響起，嗰份歸屬感好強咯。
本人曾荫權謹此宣誓。
It doesn't allow public to voice their opinion.
Those who were concerned and would like to put on masks, did so.
The story of this great city is about the years before this night and the years of success that will surely follow it.
On July 1st, 1997, Britain ceded control of Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China after ruling it for more than 150 years. The city became known as the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
There was a huge sense of satisfaction that China, which lost Hong Kong after the Opium War, finally resumed the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong. It's the first community in the world that would practice one country, two systems, Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. Finally, it's become a reality.
As a Hong Konger and a Chinese national, I was very elated. I was very proud that from now on, I can call myself Chinese and not British.
I don't recall any atmosphere of sadness or anything, or neither was there any jubilation or what. People were very matter of fact. You did not see people running around in tears, either very happy or very scared. No, people were sort of, they accepted this is going to happen.
97回歸其實係好多當年嘅香港人嘅一個心結啦，即係擔心啊、顧慮啊、惶恐啊咁。咁嗰陣時候回歸嘅時候，就大家就好擔心，就回歸咗之後變咗好似內地咁樣嘅生活條件啊，包括自由度啊，你所有嘅嘢。咁但係我哋當其時嘅就，既然國家俾咗一個咁樣嘅承諾，咁咪睇下係咪咯咁。
The joint declaration on the future of Hong Kong, which we have just signed.
13 years earlier, in 1984, Britain and China agreed to the terms of Hong Kong's handover. Beijing promised Hong Kong's way of life would remain relatively unchanged for 50 years following its return to Chinese rule under the unique one country, two systems governing principle. In the years leading up to the handover, there were signs of changes ahead. Emily Lau was first elected to the Hong Kong legislature in 1991 and re-elected in 1995. Beijing was unhappy with election reforms introduced by Britain at the tail end of colonial rule that lowered the voting age and did away with most appointed seats. So China's parliament dissolved the legislature Britain left behind and replaced it with a provisional legislative council formed according to principles of state sovereignty and smooth transition. Lau and members from the Democratic Party were left out.
Chinese government set up what they call set up their own stove. So they set up a provisional council which sat for 1 year. And we did not take part in that, so we were chucked out. I wasn't in the auditorium or the big hall of the convention center. I was outside the Legislative Council building, which I was in Statue Square. When the rain stopped, we got our big yellow ribbon, and we tied the yellow ribbon around the whole Legislative Council building as a sign that saying yellow is a color of hope and that we will come back.
A year later, Lau was re-elected in Hong Kong's first Legislative Council polls under Chinese rule. She would remain an outspoken lawmaker until her retirement in 2016, and today continues to be a staunch advocate of greater democracy. Leung Chun-yin, better known as C.Y. Leung, played a key role in drafting Hong Kong's mini-constitution, the Basic Law, under which it has been governed since the city's return to Chinese rule. Leung would go on to become Hong Kong's third chief executive, serving from 2012 to 2017.
I was born in Hong Kong in the 1950s. My father was a policeman. There was no democracy in Hong Kong. The freedoms of Hong Kong people were curtailed in many ways. We had no political freedom. The British Hong Kong government kept a very close watch on the so-called civil society, on civic societies, organizations, definitely on student organizations. And so I keep saying Hong Kong people should look back to those days.
One thing about the colonial government was they respect the judiciary. And the judiciary was very independent, and it would often fight against the government. And when the government lost in court, they would do exactly what the court said. So I think one important thing about Hong Kong is our freedoms were underpinned by the independent judiciary.
C.Y. Leung says the Basic Law was written after thorough consultation with all segments of Hong Kong society.
I was heavily involved in the drafting process as Secretary General of the Consultative Committee for the Basic Law. We had 180 members drawn from all walks of life. We had young student representatives, a representative from the Hawker Association, the tycoons of Hong Kong, and then we have quite a few civil servants, and then we had people of all nationalities, people of Indian origin, of Western origin, and so on. And the message given to me as the person who was in charge of the consultation process, that Hong Kong is not a political city. The people of Hong Kong came to Hong Kong from the mainland of China, or if they were born in Hong Kong, then their parents came to Hong Kong from the mainland of China, not for politics, and definitely not for political ideology. They came to Hong Kong for the economic freedom here, for the other freedoms that they enjoy in Hong Kong. And therefore, they said very clearly to me that Hong Kong is not a political city. It is an economic city.
I don't agree with that. I think the things that Hong Kong people value very much are economic success, prosperity, stability, freedom, personal safety, the rule of law, all in one go. Not just this, but not that. When you have over 1 million people marching, of course it's not just about making money.
今日咧，我哋而家喺個土瓜灣嘅天台裏邊啦，一陣就會拍一個追逐啊。應該係要做晒出嚟。
Long-time movie producer Tenki Tin saw Hong Kong's return to China as presenting both opportunities and challenges.
97回歸咗之後嘅，咁我哋第一時間嘅都係希望能夠融入到內地市場啦，將香港嘅電影嘅一啲我哋嘅技術啊，我哋嘅創作思維啊，我哋對市場嘅認知啊，都希望同內地可以分享，或者係咪可以去提升內地嘅拍攝啊？ 以拍一啲古裝片為主先咯，因為個場地夠大啊。咁到咁上下嘅時候就 SCMP 之後嘅咪有合拍片，咁啊然後大家分嗰個市場嘅利潤啦。當佢哋學識咗或者吸收咗之後咧，我哋香港嘅角色就慢慢我哋香港人嘅競爭力啊，我哋嘅角色就慢慢要退㗎啦。我自己對香港電影或者對市場咧，我一直都好樂觀。我樂觀嘅原因係基於一個叫事實，就係話全世界冇一個地方除咗香港之外，我哋拍戲係唔需要經過審查，今日諗到，聽日開得工，呢個係香港嘅電影優勢。
而家要影定先。
哦 ，OK。琴日你有冇影到？
琴日冇影，所以但係加盟咧就唔使特別影嘅。
One thing that hasn't changed over the last 25 years is Hong Kong's housing problem. The city has some of the highest property prices in the world, leaving many residents unable to buy a home or even afford to rent a suitable flat.
即係有小巴喎。
Si Lai Shan is a social worker who's been working with the disadvantaged even before the handover.
係啊，房屋土地問題其實係香港一個好重要嘅問題，因為其實你可以咁講，唔單止係基層嘅，其實中產都係慘嘅嚇，因為其實樓價咁高咁貴，咁好多中產其實佢買一層樓，佢真係成世喺度供緊樓，即係當佢回歸啊，好多人好期望，同埋睇緊中央點樣去做嘢嚇，咁亦都即係好多嘅一啲即係政制啊，香港嘅社會制度啊點樣發展啊。咁同埋可能嗰個民生問題唔係咁容易俾一啲即係立法會啊，或者係俾一啲政府係好注重啊，我自己覺得係嚇。
Xi says in the years following the handover, successive governments prioritised some of Hong Kong's core societal problems, but ignored others.
咁尤其是董建華講完話貧窮委員會，到咗曾蔭權好似就取消咗噶嘛，我記得係嚇。咁你就好似當呢樣嘢唔係一件事。所以嗰段時間之後，其實喺房屋同埋喺嗰個貧窮扶貧嗰方面嘅發展係停頓咗嘅。咁所以到梁振英要再做嘅時候咧，一定係更加難嘅，係因為停咗咁多年，即係要再做。咁所以我自己覺得其實係我哋啲問題係累積咗好耐。其實殖民地都唔係做得好嘅，我自己覺得係。大家好期望回歸之後咧，自己人管，自己會做好大嘅轉變。咁但係發覺原來唔係嘅喎。我哋今晚就會即係大家一齊去港島區一啲板間房啊、籠屋啊，去派一啲抗疫物資啊，咁同埋去探下佢哋，睇下佢哋有啲咩需要幫手咯。
Hong Kong's return to China not only presented residents with opportunities on the mainland, but also the chance for mainlanders seeking a better life to settle down in the city. Since 1997, more than 1.1 million mainlanders have come to live and work in Hong Kong under a one-way permit scheme. And while these migrants have gone on to become part of the fabric of the city, some Hong Kongers have blamed them for contributing to society's woes.
有啲人係講緊話，係因為新移民嚟到啫，總之所有問題都推晒去新移民，咁跟住就所有嘅問題都係。總之唔見咗新移民就解決到，因為其實新移民嚟到香港，如果你睇翻個數據咧，其實最差嗰陣時需要即係申請綜援嘅人都係10幾個%，如果平常咧係4-5個%嘅需要嘅啫。
Another concern in the lead-up to Hong Kong's return to China was the impact it would have on the city's economy and its status as an international finance centre. In the decades leading up to the handover, the city's economy largely changed from manufacturing to service-based. But how would Hong Kong, with its robust economy and developed stock market, fit in with the mainland financial system, whose stock market was still in its infancy? Anthony Neo was the chairman of the Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission in 1997.
I was very conscious that people were a bit skeptical about Hong Kong at the time. I can't say I have any skepticism because, you know, I was so imbued by a sense of adventure. I would be wrong to say that I had none. The stock market in China, by 1997, the market hasn't grown very much. The world's financial markets and the people who were outside of Hong Kong were very uncertain as to whether Hong Kong would continue to be an international financial center. So a lot of my time was spent in really trying to preach the message of Hong Kong and to preach the message of one country, two systems, and to try to convince people that one country, two systems will work and Hong Kong will continue to be a financial center which services not only the mainland but also the world.
Neo says it was Hong Kong's ability to run its own economy under the one country, two systems principle that helped the city weather the Asian financial crisis that hit a year after the handover.
China at that time, in 1997, didn't really have a very large foreign reserve. I think we probably had a slightly bigger foreign reserve than mainland China at the time. So we had to pull ourselves out by ourselves, even though the financial crisis in Asia was actually exploding. You know, the markets in Hong Kong were still good. It went quite crazy right up to the end of 1997. Stock market was good, property market was good, the GDP was rising. Everybody seems to be quite happy. And of course, then the market came down. Then we had the speculation. So we had a bad year in 1998. And then the market then went back again, right up to the time when we had SARS. You know, I still remember that I was very taken by this at the time. You know, a lot of young people were out of jobs, and some people didn't even have enough food. You know, I think this is one of the great attributes of Hong Kong, is the resilience of its systems and the resilience of its people. Without that, I think it will be very hard for us to actually weather all of these good and bad times.
In the subsequent 2 decades, China's rapid economic growth saw it transform into the world's second biggest economy and become a safety net for Hong Kong. In 1997, the city made up about 18.5% of the country's total GDP. Today, it accounts for less than 2.5%. The mainland has also provided Hong Kong with resources to help it navigate through difficult times. Most recently, medical supplies, expertise, and mainland personnel were sent to the city during a devastating 5th wave of COVID-19 infections. Perhaps the biggest challenge Hong Kong has faced in the last 25 years is the definition of what it means to live under one country, two systems. Large-scale protests in 2003, 2014, and in 2019 were all sparked and driven by concerns that Hong Kong was losing its high degree of autonomy. But former Chief Executive C.Y. Leung insists not much has actually changed when it comes to Hong Kongers' freedoms and way of life.
Our legal system hasn't changed. Our judicial system hasn't changed. Our education system, okay, has changed from 3 years to 4 years, but it's not because of the mainland of China. The fact that we drive on the left-hand side road, that has not changed. Our currency system hasn't changed. Our financial system hasn't changed. Our taxation system hasn't changed. So when people say one country, two system has changed, what has changed?
In the initial years, people were feeling okay. Of course, they did not expect democracy to suddenly take place, but at least the free lifestyle, the rule of law continued. But in about 2014, when we started to have the campaign for that universal suffrage, and the government became harder and harder, and then the Chinese government came out and say that, okay, you can have universal suffrage, but it's only when we have a limited number of candidates. So that's the time when people say, oh my God, it's not going to happen.
If you say that Hong Kong has lost part of its high degree of autonomy, that because people had the wrong idea about high degree of autonomy in the first place. Hong Kong could elect its own chief executive, but upon election, chief executive elect has to be appointed by the Central People's Government. It's in the basic law. It's in the Joint Declaration. Now, if people, as a starting point, pretend that, oh, I thought democracy in Hong Kong means that we could elect our own chief executive and Beijing should just stand aside with their hands down and just put a rubber stamp on the result of the election, then this is wrong, because it's not in the Joint Declaration and it's not in the basic law.
I think it is in the basic law that we have direct election. We can choose the chief executive and members of the Legislative Council. Some people accuse us, or even me, of saying, we say, oh, we want civil nominations, which is against the basic law, which I accept, because it doesn't mention civil nomination. I can accept it. If it is truly broadly representative, meaning what? Meaning many Hong Kong people can vote to choose that committee. As it stands, most people have no vote, so it's not broadly representative.
For many, like film producer Tenki Tin, one of the biggest changes for Hong Kong has been Beijing's imposition of a national security law in response to the anti-government protest chaos of 2019. It prohibits secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. Tin says the law has impacted how artists approach their work.
因為國安法，佢唔係將電影有一個叫做商業品嘅看待，佢會將你，呢啲你唔好拍喎，我拉你嘅喎。我哋無形中我哋嘅創作上面嘅，我哋係有咗一個叫做自我審查。但係以前你唔需要擔心，因為你拍戲啫嘛，假噶嘛，如有類同，實屬巧合，講到明噶啦。咁但係今日相對嚟講就冇咗一種咁暢所欲言或者咁自我可以天馬行空啦。
Now, people have said that this security law actually is designed, in fact, to snuff out freedom. That is not correct, because if you look at the national security law, it is no worse, in fact, than many security laws around the world. People have forgotten that we are part of one country. Many people have. So now people have to really rethink their position. We cannot actually lose that tie that we have with our mother country. And in fact, from a pure economic sense, we could not possibly do that. Hong Kong has always been tied to the economy of the mainland, ever since 1841. So there's no difference now. And in fact, more so, that Hong Kong were to survive and were to prosper, it will very much need to actually create something out of that tie that we have. And that is an important tie.
Hong Kong today is full of people who are very apprehensive and worried. So many people have been arrested. I think over 11,000, and thousands have been charged, and many are in jail. Of course, people are very scared, and their families and friends, and some have left, many have left. So people may not speak out.
If we didn't enact the national security law, you still have riots in the streets, and people will be killed. Would you prefer Hong Kong in that state or Hong Kong today? People who want universal suffrage to elect the chief executive, are they prepared to do it in strict accordance with the provisions of the basic law, namely nominating committee nomination before election and substantive appointment by Beijing after election? Let's ask these people first, these questions. If we get a yes to each of these two questions, then we have something resolved.
我覺得香港今日有冇希望個發展點樣呢？其實好靠每一個人呢，我哋嘅參與啦，同埋我哋願唔願意坐低溝通啦，同埋我哋嘅目標係咪真係為一啲即係社會嘅發展嘅好而去做溝通同埋去行動咯。
正如頭先我講過啦嚇，我係一個好樂觀嘅人啦。香港今日係對好多唔同嘅人嚟講係有唔同嘅感受，但係我自己好愛香港。